velocity. Let's have another example. An airplane is moving along a runway at a constant velocity of 14.8 kilometers per hour for 30.0 seconds. Then it accelerates at 5.20 meters per second squared for 45.1 seconds until it finally lifts off the ground. Determine the displacement and the velocity before takeoff. So again, the first step when we solve motion is to draw a frame of reference. Draw natin yung frame of reference natin. And for example, our frame of reference, of course, always Cartesian plane. Yan, Cartesian plane. Straight kayo, natsambahan. Cartesian plane. Since there is no direction indicated in our problem, of course, we will assume it is going to the right if there is no direction. So, nado kay airplane. So, mag-drawing kong airplane. Best in drawing ba ako pag kinder. Mo akong drawing hantod karon pang kinder lang taman. For example, this is our airplane. Oh, yan, airplane daw na daw. Sir, kailangan dyan mag-draw og airplane. It is not necessary. You can draw a circle lang. Circle lang, that can represent an airplane. Di mo gina-airplane ako. Mura nagbao. Okay? So, for example, this is the start of our motion. And at the start of our motion, the airplane is already moving. Tama? It is already moving at a constant velocity. So that means at the start of our motion, there is already an initial velocity. Do you follow? There's already an initial velocity, which is 14.8 kilometers per hour at the start of the motion. Yan, nakasulat na. So 14.8 kilometers per hour. And then, for 30 seconds, it moves for 14.8 kilometers per hour. So at time 30.0 seconds, of course, mag-move ang airplane from this point until, for example, aabot na siya dito banda. Abot na siya dito banda. This is now our airplane after 30 seconds. Ayan, di ba? Perfect. So that is our airplane after 30 seconds. Now, since this is constant velocity, constant yung velocity natin, ibig sabihin, the velocity at this point, what is the velocity at this point after 30 seconds? Since the velocity is constant, ibig sabihin, the velocity here is also 14.8 kilometers per hour. Do you follow? Kasi constant yung motion. There is no change in motion. I hope nakuha. So after this one, after 30 seconds daw, it accelerates. So after 30 seconds, it accelerates. Acceleration is equal to 5.20 meters per second squared. It accelerates for 45.1 seconds. That is time, of course. So time is equal to 45.1 seconds until it finally lifts off the ground. So, ibig sabihin, nandito na yung ating airplane. Di ba? Perfect kayo akong airplane. Di ba? So, before it finally lifts off the ground. Okay, so that means meron na tayong concept on what the problem is. Ma-visualize na natin siya. Sa first 30 seconds, constant motion. And then, sa after 30 seconds, it is constant acceleration. Do you follow? Next is to, ano nang gagawin natin next? Identify what are the required quantities. Identify what are the required quantities. First required, ano ba yung first required? A, the total displacement. The displacement of the, anong tawag niyan? Of our airplane. And then the second unknown is our velocity. The velocity before takeoff. So ibig sabihin velocity before takeoff, dito man siya mag-take off. So that means this will be our velocity. And since this is after the motion, tama? Mo man ni ang before the motion. This is our after motion. So this is our velocity final. So ibig sabihin ang hinahanap natin dito is the final velocity, which is unknown. Okay? So, ano natin ha? For letter A, ang hinahanap natin is total displacement. Ibig sabihin, from this point to this point. So, meron tayong from here to here, displacement yan. And then from this point until this point, ang displacement na yan. Okay? So i-add mo lang yung dalawa later. And then we're going to solve also for the final velocity. Nakuha. So let's start first with letter A. Start tayo sa letter A. Solution. Solution. Remember, for part A, we are going to determine the total displacement. However, there are two displacements. First part and then second part. So i-add lang natin yan sila lahat later. Okay, start tayo dito sa first part na displacement. Remember our equations. Ano-ano yung mga equations na kailangan natin? So isulat ko dito yung mga equations ha. Also may colors sa equations, violet na lang. These are the four equations. Okay? So let's start now sa ato ang part 1 na displacement. We're going to solve for B, tawago na to na og B sub 1. B sub 1 ang anon. Now take note, this motion, unsa man nga motion ang first part. This first part is constant motion. Remember? This is constant motion because the velocity is constant. Ibig sabihin, if that is constant motion, we are going to use the first equation. Kay first equation man ato ang constant motion. Remember? Okay, so that means we are going to use velocity times time. So we are going to solve for the velocity. Ano ba yung velocity natin? 14.8 kilometers per hour. Hala, sir, hindi siya naka-standard unit. Are we going to convert that into standard unit? Yes. Always remember to convert that into standard unit. So what is that in meters per second? Alam nyo naman paano i-convert into meters per second, di ba? Times 0.2777777, tama? And that is equivalent to 4.11 4.11 meters per second. Convert ito ha. So, sulat ko na lang dito. 4.11 meters per second. Okay? So, convert natin yan into standard units. And it is already discussed sa video lesson. So, 4.11 meters per second times the time. Ano ba yung time? Ayun. 30.0 seconds. 30.0 seconds. So mag-cancel out si seconds, and that means our answer, anong answer nito? That is, pila man na? 123.3 meters, kasi meters na lang yung naiwan. Okay? So 123.3 meters. Now take note, how many significant figures ang kailangan natin? Tatlo, kasi tatlo lang sila. So that means we will retain the number of significant figures. This is equivalent to 123 meters. 3 significant figures. Okay? So ibig sabihin, this part is 123 meters. Now how about this part? Hindi pa tayo tapos because total displacement yung hinahanap. This part, remember, this is constant acceleration. Okay? Ibig sabihin, we will choose either of the three equations because we are dealing with constant acceleration. So for D2, hahanapin natin what will be the equations that is most suitable for our given values. So ang hinahanap natin is ang displacement, tama? Displacement yung hinahanap natin. So tingnan natin saan yung may displacement sa equations. Ang may displacement, the third equation and the fourth equation. Sir, bakit hindi ito pwede yung first equation? Because we are now dealing with constant acceleration. So hindi pwede yung first equation kasi constant motion man yan. So ito lang dalawa. Next, pipili tayo sa dalawa kung sino yung better. So pipili tayo ano yung gagamitin natin na equations. So check muna natin if all the values are given. For example, ito. Mayroon bang acceleration sa second part? Yes, may acceleration sa second part. Tama? Meron ka bang VF? Sa second part, may VF ba? Walang VF. Tama? Walang green na VF. Tama? So, wala tayong VF. Ako, wala akong VF, of course. GF ang nasa ako. Ikaw, wala kang VF. Maghulat sa ka. So VF, wala tayong VF. So that means since there is no final velocity yet, that means we cannot use this equation. Follow? Kasi walang velocity final sa given. Okay? Next, proceed tayo sa fourth equation if ever we can use this equation. Do we have the velocity initial? Yes, meron tayong velocity initial. Daro, initial man siya because this is the start of our motion. Tama? So this is our velocity initial. Do we have time? Yes, napakaraming time. Do we have acceleration? Yes. There is an acceleration. Do we have time? Yes. So that means lahat ng quantities dito, lahat ng variables are present. So that means we are going to use this equation. Okay? So for d sub 2, we are going to use velocity initial times time plus 1/2 a t squared. Okay? So we are going to substitute all the terms. Velocity initial is dara 4.11 meters per second. And then the time is 45 45.1 seconds plus 1/2 times the acceleration. What is our acceleration? 5.20 meters per second squared. And then times time. What is our time? Same, 45.1 seconds and then squared. Okay? So ito, anong sagot dito? 4.11 times 45.1. 4.11 times 45.1. And that is 185.361 meters. Kasi mag-cancel out si seconds. Cancel natin seconds ha? Wait lang. Red. So may second sa baba, may second sa taas, so cancel. So meters na lang ang naiwan. Okay? Dito sa kabila, plus 1/2, what is that? 45.1 squared times 5.20 divided by 2. That is 5,288.426. Unit is meters. Bakit meters? Mag-cancel ang dalawang seconds. Cancel si second squared and since second squared. Okay? But remember, we are going to follow the rules of significant figures ha. I-trace natin. So, how many significant figures dito? Tatlo. So, yan, tatlo. Dito. Hanggang sa 5. Dito sa kabila, how many significant figures? Tatlo din. Hindi kasali si 1/2. Okay? So, tatlo din. So, di hanggang sa 8. Hanggang sa 8. So, we are going to add. Add natin yan lahat. Plus 185.361. And that will give us, tadi na yun siya masulat maabot ay. That is equivalent to 5,400. Ha? 473? Tama?
Apa, sir.
473.787 meters. Okay? But take note, hindi yan final answer because we will follow the rules of significant figures. This is addition. And the rule for addition is least precise, the farthest to the left. This is ones, this is tenths. So that means hanggang tenths lang dapat tayo, hanggang tenths. So hanggang dito lang dapat sa 7 kasi siya yung farthest to the left. So that means our final answer for part 2 is, ipit naman kayo, 5,470 meters. So ibig sabihin, this part here, part 2 is 5,470 meters. Okay? Question so far? Or what have you noticed? If napansin niyo, tatlong significant figures lang yung mga givens natin. So, ibig sabihin, yung answer natin, dapat tatlong significant figures lang din. Okay? So, ganun lang. Tingin ka lang sa given. Tatlong significant figures yung given natin. So, expect that your answer must only contain 3 significant figures. Okay. So let's proceed. Is this our final answer? It is not yet our final answer. Because we know the displacement, yan, i-add muna natin yan sila. Dalawa. Because we are asked about the total displacement traveled from this point until dito. So i-add lang natin yan sila dalawa. Total, dito ko isulat ha, kasi may space pa dito. Total displacement is equal to 123 meters plus 5,470 meters. And that will give us pilaman. 5,593 meters. However, roots of significant figures, hanggang dito tayo sa 10th place pa din, ang farthest. Hanggang 10th place ang farthest. So, ibig sabihin, our final answer, total displacement must be, this is our final answer in red, 5,590 meters. So that is our final answer. Or if you notice, kung titingnan mo yung number of significant figures, yung final answer natin, 3 significant figures, lahat ng given natin, 3 significant figures. So dapat pareho lang. Okay? So total displacement is 5,590 meters. That is why frame of reference is very important to help us understand the problem better. Mas madali kasi siya kapag we have a visual representation of the problem. Okay? Let's proceed with letter B. Hindi pa tayo tapos. Mayroon pa letter B. Unknown for letter B is velocity final. So proceed ako sa next. Velocity final. For letter B, unknown is the final velocity. Unknown si final velocity. So check natin dito, saan ba si final velocity? Si final velocity is the velocity before takeoff dito. Tama? Saan ba siya banda na part? This is part of the part 2. Part 2 ito na part dito. Dito na section. Okay? Si velocity final. Follow? So we are going to identify all the given values dito sa part na to. So ano ba yung mga given values sa part na yan? Ano yung mga given? Unang given, we have the initial velocity because this is the start of the motion dito na part. So the initial velocity is 14.8 kilometers per hour or velocity initial is 4.11 meters per second, standard unit. Second given, we have time. Yan, time. Second given, time. We have, pila ito? 45.1 seconds. And then the third given, we have acceleration. Acceleration is equal to 5.20 meters per second squared. And then, of course, meron na tayong displacement kasi na-solve na natin si displacement. So displacement is equal to 5,000, pila ito? 740? 470 meters. So ito yung displacement natin. So meron na tayong given values. Next, we are going to look back doon sa ating equations. What are the equations? So these are the equations. Again, you do not need to memorize those equations. So we are going to check saan sa equation ang may VF. Saan sa equation ang may VF. So let us check. So we cannot use this equation. Why? Because that is for constant motion and we are dealing with acceleration. Oh, yun, oh, mayroong acceleration. So do not use the first equation. So we are going to identify saan sa equation ang may VF. Ayan, may VF. Wala, may VF. Wala, ito din, may VF. Oh. So silang dalawa may VF. Now, which will be used for our problem solving? So let us identify if all the other variables are given. Acceleration. Do we have acceleration? Yes, there. Acceleration, check. Do we have initial velocity? There. So natay initial velocity. Do we have time? Yes, yun. So that means we can solve using the second equation. Pwede? Sa second equation. Okay? Sir, how about third equation? Pwede ba sa third equation? Pwede po. Check na to. Acceleration na check. Displacement na check. Initial velocity na check. So pwede po ka sa third equation. Sir, which will be used? It's up to you. Actually, the same lang nag-answer if you will solve for it. So we will use the second equation because mas madali lang siya. So we have acceleration. Acceleration is equal to the final velocity minus the initial velocity divided by time. And we are going to solve for the final velocity. Okay? Solve for the final velocity. If you watch the video sa YouTube, there is an equation there for the final velocity. And final velocity, cross multiply lang man mo ni, tama? Cross multiply is equal to acceleration times time and then transpose because plus VI. This equation is in the video. Makita nimo siya sa video. Tama? If nagtanaw ka sa video. So acceleration, what is our acceleration? 5.20 meters per second squared times. What is our time? The time is 45.1 seconds plus what is our initial velocity? Our initial velocity is 4.11 meters per second. Okay? So we are going to cancel the units na mag-cancel out. So may seconds sa taas, cancel seconds, and then there is also 2 seconds. Duha man ka seconds. So ang isa lang ma-cancel. So what is the answer for this part? This is equivalent to pila man eh? 5.20. So this is 234.52 meters per second plus 4.11 meters per second. So we are going to trace the number of significant figures. 3 significant figures dito. So that means hanggang dito lang dapat yan. Hanggang dito lang. Okay? That's the purpose. So if we are going to add the terms, this will give us 238
238.63 po, sir.
63 meters per second. But
Meters
remember,
per second po.
meters per second, very good. Remember, we will follow the rules of significant figures. This addition, so farthest to the left. So ito, dito. Dito sa kabila, hanggang sa 4 lang, hanggang ones place. So that means our final answer must only be until the ones place. Hanggang dito lang dapat siya. Okay, so our final answer, 239 meters per second. But if you notice, the number of significant figures is 3. Pareho lang sa given, tatlo. Tingnan mo yung given, tatlong mga significant figures. So that means our answer must only have 3 significant figures. So hindi na necessary na i-trace. Pero kung gusto mo to make sure na tama, i-trace mo the number of significant figures.